science fiction. We make no guarantees, however, how long it will remain fiction. Fiction. Fiction.
Thoughty Friday, cognonauts and salutations. I'm Ayla, and I'll be your host tonight for this fun show called Exo Fathom. And I am joined by two very lovely co-hosts, Nick and Mike. How are y'all doing tonight on this Thoughty Friday?
Good. Sleepy, a little hot, but not too bad. Happy Friday.
That hot hoe over there. Sorry. In line with the Thoughty. For those of you who are not clued in on the inside joke, tonight's episode is going to be about Thoth, who's an Egyptian god of wisdom. And I was working really hard on an opening salutation, and that is the best I could come up with, unfortunately. So there's that. And to Mike,
yeah, it was good enough. Don't let like perfect be the enemy of good enough. You know, like it's fine. Okay.
Oh, so wise, my dear friend.
Well, hey, I didn't. I stole that knowledge from I think from like an Irishman or something. So you could thank the Irish, don't thank me.
Nice. I love when knowledge comes from like some random guy somewhere.
Some dude on the street.
Yeah, or somebody in line. Right.
Yeah, he was like a back alley wisdom dealer. So like you had to pay him money or pay him like work or something, do something for him. He would give you like a little nugget of wisdom as the quest reward.
One of these
reminds
days
me of the Sesame Street guy that used to have the trench coat, and he'd be like, "Psst, hey kid, you want to buy a vowel?"
Oh my God.
And opened up his trench coat, and it was a whole bunch of E's and A's and O's. Yeah. That was a part.
Wow.
That was part of
E's? That's got a whole nother meaning. Well, no, it's funny. You're making me want to like go to Times Square one of these days and put up a little sign that just says like, you know, knowledge $5. See how much I make.
It's like the Peanuts. Lucy used to give advice for 5 cents.
Oh my God, that's right. She's ahead of her time.
Very wise.
But how about you, Mike? How are you doing today?
I'm hanging in there. How are you doing, Ayla?
Good, actually. I'm okay. I'm really excited to talk about Thoth tonight. And I had to think about that because for some reason I cannot pronounce this name correctly. So I'm going to just refer to him as Mr. T. Or no, I'm not going to say Thoughty because I feel like I'll be smited. So I'll just say Mr. T. My co-host can totally name him correctly, but I just don't want to butcher it repeatedly throughout the show. I might change that up, and if I do, that could be a fun drinking game. How many times do I mess it up for the listeners? So anyway, are you guys ready to talk about Mr. T?
Yep.
It's awkward. Okay, I'll just try to say Thoth.
Or Thoth. So you can say either or. That's fine.
Okay. You know what? It's gonna be fun. I'll go with it, and we'll see how many times I say it right versus not.
I'm not going to drink every time you say it wrong. Otherwise, I'm not going to make it out of this 2-hour podcast. It would be dead.
Considering the direction of the show, I think it would be hilarious if you got drunker during our conversation. All right, cool. Well, so I'm very excited. I just learned about Thoth. I just learned about this god earlier this week, and I was mesmerized by everything around the depictions and the mythology, and it was super exciting. So first, if you Google this particular god, one of the first descriptions that pops up says that he's the Egyptian god of writing, magic, wisdom, and the moon. I've also seen Thoth credited for the invention of geometry, astronomy, medicine, hieroglyphs, science, art, and judgment. And I thought it was really interesting because we recently did a show. I think Nick hosted it on Prometheus. Is that right, Nick? Was that one yours?
Yes.
And I really loved it. I thought it was sort of this cautionary tale, kind of aligned with this concept of the light bringer, which kind of aligns with mythology around someone first name S, last name N, which sort of positions knowledge as a double-edged sword. So I guess my first question to each of you, do you think knowledge is susceptible to the law of diminishing returns? Plus sub-question, how do you distinguish between knowledge and wisdom?
Ad addendum. No.
You know what I got that from? That one of my favorite movies is High Fidelity, and Jack Black's character is always asking them these questions like top 5 artists in 1990, but sub question or subcategory, and then he's like, they had to have like, you know, whatever. Like he always qualifies it. And it's really funny. Great movie. But anyway, to the questions.
Mm-hmm. So does knowledge have a diminishing return? I don't know. I'm 100%. I mean, obviously, I'm not privy to all the knowledge that there is.
Well, why?
It's a good question. No, I do wonder a little bit about the concept of demystification, though. I don't know if it's necessarily. I don't know if you could quantify it as a diminishment of returns, because you're likely getting something back from it. You know, maybe it diminishes over time, but I think like the demystification is probably where I'd point to any sort of loss if I'm thinking in that direction.
Can you elaborate on how you think of demystification?
Yeah, so I mean, I would say like sort of in the mythological or metaphysical sense, the concept of knowledge being a bit of a curse. Knowing can sometimes be a burden. It can be a real burden on the human, and so I wonder if by unwrapping all of the mysteries that there are to life, what type of psychological effect that does have on a human. Whether I just to say that maybe like there are certain things that that because they were mystified in the past sort of shaped our psyches as humans now. So yeah, I don't know.
Do you want to answer the sub question now or after?
No, give Mike his hand, and then I'll come back to the sub question.
Sub question. Okay, Mike, go. Do you think there's a law of diminishing returns when it comes to knowledge? I think I broke his brain over there.
No, he's thinking. He's thinking deeply.
What do you mean by diminishing returns?
So I guess, okay, this is like a crazy extreme example, right? Because there's knowledge for one person versus knowledge for a whole bunch of people. So the funny example I have is like, and this is up your alley a little bit, right? Like machines and Terminator kind of scenarios. So we're smart enough to create something, but the law of diminishing returns is that we're smart enough to create something that could annihilate us. That's like an extreme thing. But I think that like on an individual level, you can have other cases where, you know, knowledge of things kind of, yeah, like Nick said, acts as a burden, either psychologically or in the sense that like, you know, if you're aware of everything, what do you do with that knowledge? Or the Cassandra effect, where you have all this wisdom, but nobody believes you. That has to be super frustrating. So again, like, you know, it's great to be smart and smarter and getting smarter and smarter, but eventually, do you think that there comes a point when it's not great anymore? It's like totally not a good idea. Overcapacity or something like that.
I think you answered your own question. But if you want my opinion on it, yeah. The knowledge is there's a couple different ways you can look at this, I guess. I had a teacher that once told me that boring people know a lot of stuff about one thing and only one thing. So if you go and talk to them, they can talk to you about this one thing that they know everything about, but anything else, they're clueless. They have really no real knowledge on the matters. Whereas interesting people tend to know a little bit about a lot of things. So then what becomes the problem of knowing a lot about one thing? And it becomes a curse where you lose contact with the common person the more you learn about any individual thing. If you bring that out to a wider scope, then you become isolated because you lose the ability to communicate, and this is due to the shaping nature of ignorance. A lot of people believe that what you know kind of shapes everything around you. In reality, it's the shadows that show you where all the light is, right? So it's the shadows of your ignorance that will shape ultimately your psyche and what you do with new knowledge that comes in.
Ooh.
Yeah, no, there's I'm not smart by any metric or anything like that, but the knowledge that I do have and some of the farther reaching stuff that I can't communicate with people is a burden, because nobody's going to know what the hell I'm talking about. And so you kind of become the raving lunatic on a soapbox or the cardboard box with the end is nigh sign.
I feel you, man. Not in the sense, I liked your disclaimer, by the way. And sorry to interrupt you, but it just made me think that, like, for now, whenever I want to do a disclaimer like that, to say something like, all right, I'm not a Mensa member, guys. However, just go from there. But
the thing is, like, I think knowledge is the heaviest material that we can use as a human. I think it's the better you get at extracting it in any form, whether it be book knowledge, street knowledge, human knowledge, whatever. It weighs heavy on your internal soul.
So you would agree that there's sort of this diminishing return as a person accumulates knowledge.
Yes, and knowledge is very whole hog. Knowledge is very addicting. If you become a knowledge addict, I would put money on when you're gonna, take a long walk off of a short cliff.
Yeah, gotcha. Yeah. No, I mean, well, yeah.
And then the second question was, I believe, the difference between knowledge and wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
I've thought about this a lot, like how, because wisdom feels like condensed knowledge. So how does it seems like wisdom is knowledge plus experience, and then you get a little bit of wisdom. You can share that wisdom, and then not everybody follows it because they may have the same knowledge as you, but they don't have the experience. So I think that's the difference, and the only way to bridge the gap is to experience something with the knowledge that you have in order to form it into a new material that we call wisdom.
Yeah, I think a lot of philosophers would agree with you on that sort of a priori, a posteriori kind of knowledge, which categorizes experience. And I like that definition of wisdom. Nick, anything to add to that?
No, I think that's probably right. It would seem application of knowledge would be probably close enough to wisdom. Definitely experience. I don't know. Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't consider somebody who just came out of college like wise, but I would consider somebody who's been in their field and had life experience and all of that stuff wise. So maybe it's a temporal thing.
Would you consider the college, the fresh graduate knowledgeable?
Yeah, absolutely. Probably specifically knowledgeable too, because that's what you do to go to college. So yeah, absolutely. I would consider somebody who just finished classes knowledgeable because it's still fresh in their mind, but it's still kind of theoretical and not applied yet.
For sure.
Yeah, I really like that. I also think that there has to be, maybe not has to, but when I think about wisdom, I have this feeling like it's knowledge and experience and some sort of reflection or thoughtfulness, that's born out of time spent considering maybe areas of gray or something like that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I can see that. That's one part of the algorithm, I guess, that I overlooked is that reflection. Reflection is important, but it is imperfect.
Mm-hmm. Right. Because like you're saying, it depends on your experience. If you have an experience leaning one way, then your reflections would probably skew towards that, nature versus nurture kind of situation, which is a real thing that we still wonder about today. Well, very cool.
Sartre's broken mirror.
Oh, I'm blanking right now.
That,
Fill in our audience.
so the broken mirror is when you sort of like look inside yourself, because you can't have a objective opinion or an objective statement about your reflections. The mirror in itself is broken. There are ways to go about this where you create another mirror to reflect off of that mirror or try to look at it at all these different angles, but you run into an ad absurdum fallacy of or the ad absurdum limitation of self-reflection, where there's no way that you can remove your biases completely when you reflect on yourself in order to gain a bit of wisdom.
I think you're hinting at Nick's show for next week.
Stay tuned.
Oh, you don't want to do it?
No, we're in this show.
All right, we're in this show, guys. We're here and now. Well, super cool. Let's get into learning a little bit about Thoth. I'll share a little bit about. I'm sorry, I'm going to.
Damn it, Ayla!
You almost had it. You could have just kept going.
Wait, was it wrong? Thoth?
No, you just
I
keep
did it.
going.
Okay.
Just
yeah.
let
No,
it
you're
ride
fine. I'm
over.
just messing with you.
Okay. So I'll share so for those of you listening, the next few minutes, next hour and 15 minutes roughly, we're going to talk about some common depictions, and then I'll talk a little bit about mythology, a little bit about magic, and some interesting questions that I hope you'll reflect on as well. So in the depictions of Thoth, he's usually seen as a man with the head of either an ibis or a baboon, animals that were sacred to him. So I guess I can go on, but I just wanted to ask, why do you each think that Egyptians wedded god figures with animals? And I only say that from like a now perspective where, so often we regard animals as inferior to us because, it's only recently that folks are like, oh, animals do feel pain. Oh, they might have some consciousness or thought, but like it still seems on the fringe,
Well,
and so it's interesting to me that they have, animals with their gods.
The Egyptians were very fond of cats, so I would assume that they were very fond of all the other animals too. Especially being in northern Africa, you're going to have lots of animals. 6,000 years ago, it probably looked completely different than it does today. There are probably a lot more animals around because the Sahara sort of snuffed out all those animals. But yeah, I would think that if you're, it would seem very logical if you're a civilization to look outward at animal characteristics and sort of see them as something to exalt. We exalted the flight of birds, the ferociousness of large predators, all of that type of stuff. I think maybe because it's something speaks to something in the potentiality of us. I'm not sure.
Well, and you and I had a really interesting conversation earlier today where I think we were talking about this idea that a lot of animals in their environment have adapted really well to those environments. They don't need language to communicate. They don't need tools. They are equipped with everything they need to hunt, to feed, to reproduce, and all that stuff. But humans, for our frailty, our coping with the nature was to just get smarter and to utilize tools and to think about stuff and plan ahead and work as a team and all that kind of stuff. So I also wonder if maybe having animals wedded to the gods, there's this understanding and union that there exists the possibility to live in unison with your surroundings and not need extraneous sort of equipment, if you will.
Oh, how harmonious of you.
I was just thinking about it. But it is interesting, and you think about it, like a lot of humans think we're so superior to animals on the planet, but we have a very hard time in survival situations. Even survivalists have a hard time in survival situations.
If it wasn't for our brains, we would be dead, long dead. Our brains are the only thing that kept us alive, really. You think about it.
Weird to say that.
I mean, like, seriously, you don't even have to go that far. Just go up into the mountains of Southern California without clothes and see how long you last. I mean, like, it's, you're not going to last very long, that's for sure.
So why do you think we idolize athletes? Why is it that we're always pulled into the spectacle of a sports game? Or why do we idolize superheroes or things like that?
Gladiators and things like that. I don't know. I guess agility and peak performance.
They all do things that we believe are impossible or that we can't do, right? So then you kind of move the timeline backwards and get a lot closer to hunting, where the in Mesoamerican cultures, or like the myth of the jaguar or something, or the myth of it's these it's like the heroization of things that aren't human, that I think our conscious is more prey animal naturally than predator. So we sort of idolize the animals that take on that more predator role and do it so well that it just seems like they're perfect for that one thing they do. So they become idolized and become like a god. So I think that's why we, at least back then, used to combine animals and gods together, because we were closer to hunting, and those animals hunted in ways or did things that we humans just can't do for one reason or another.
I wonder when we started making animals villains, because there has been, like, it does seem to me like there's two choices, right? You could take the choice that Mike just explained, where you're sort of revering the predator for its prowess, or you can turn him into a monster. I'm wondering where why that distinction, or why those two different takes.
I think maybe once we hit the era of the Renaissance, maybe castles too, you can start, just once civilization becomes good enough and self-involved enough to start to forget the past of hunting animals.
Close things out.
Yeah, and so it's no longer the predator at the door you have to worry about. It's the neighboring king, right? So we start to say oh, who cares about these animals? Just kill them. And we're good enough at killing them to where it's no longer a arduous task where half your village dies or something like that, right? We have the technology, we have the tool, we have the tech to get it done really quickly and efficiently, but we don't have the tech or the cunning or the understanding to get rid of our neighbor who's doing silly things.
I hope your neighbor's not listening to this right now, eyes widened.
No, my neighbors are cool with me.
No.
Shout out to my front door neighbor. I hope your back is feeling better. I know you went through the surgery and all that. Shout out to my back door neighbor. Hope the kids well, and hope the families are well.
Well, and what's funny about that is I was actually thinking about your neighbor, the possum, which most people would put in a trap and dispose of, but
possum was so cute.
It was cute. He's got a little possum in his back patio, and it's adorable.
So there's little like when I saw it, I was like, "Oh, you're like a little baby. Where's your?" I always freak out. I'm like, "Where's the mother? The mother is going to eat me somewhere around." But it was just hanging out and like looking at me. I was like,
Well, and that's funny too, because like possums are much smaller than humans, but I'm legitimately terrified of them, not just for their attack power, but the disease, the inconvenience.
They're actually pretty well dispositioned. I mean, they hiss as a reaction, but they play dead once you get close to them.
Oh.
And then they eat ticks. That's why they're so important. So,
Okay. We need a possum god. I
Mhm.
didn't know that. But I do want to circle back to something Mike said earlier that I really liked, which was this idea that maybe humans aligned more with prey than predator, which, like Nick pointed out, it could be the opposite, humans aligning with predator more than prey. But this idea that if we were aligned with prey, we might idolize predators more and vice versa is kind of a new one for me. And I think
there is also, I think, what Mike said about the sort of the creation of the bordered village probably was when we started to turn the animals into sort of monsters instead of deities, because you would start to breed cultures and generations of people who have less experience out in the forest. More experience just in the village centers within the boundaries of the village. So then everything outside of the village becomes scary. And yeah, so I think that would definitely make sense as to why that psychological shift happens.
Yeah, and then you can kind of see us prey being idolizing predators even now with our fascination with like true crime. Mm-hmm. Why does everybody love serial killers? Why do I know who Charles Manson is?
His music.
Does it matter? Yeah, right.
His music's terrible. I'm just like,
That's Marilyn Manson. Wrong Manson.
No. Charles Manson actually did have like
he made music?
He made music.
All right, now
he went crazy because Brian Wilson of the Beach Boys said that he was going to give him a record deal and he never did. Well, that's not a joke.
No, it's not a joke. It's just one of those things where, like, of all people, like, I don't know how the Beach Boy guy got entangled.
They were friends.
I know, it's so sad.
Or like, why do I know Richard Ramirez's name? You can argue it's an LA thing, right? It's like the Sharon Tate killings and all that, but still, like, this fascination with true crime is because at our base, if we're a normal, well-adjusted individual, we're prey animals. And so we have our threat detection up all the time. And society influences what that means. But we're still fascinated by the idea of a predator who can slip into a town and kill a few people and slip out, because that's so foreign to us.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and what I really like, and kind of what both of you guys are touching on, is this idea of how knowledge can influence what we focus on. Because in the bordered village example, Nick, you mentioned kids that might be born once the village has been bordered. So they don't have that direct experience with the predators. It's now something mysterious and therefore even scarier because the brain's filling in, oh, that growl sounds 10 feet tall, no 12 feet tall, no 14 feet tall. I don't know. I just could run. And then, Mike, you're pointing out this sort of threat detection that, you know, maybe people are kind of knowledge gathering so that if somebody breaks into their home, they have a little bit of an edge on how to respond. But in both cases, it's like sort of this absence of direct experiential knowledge. And in the other case, it's sort of this collecting of other people's experiential knowledge so as to avoid threat in the future. And those are very interesting things that are that people, like would choose to focus on as opposed to learning a guitar and reading the Encyclopedia Britannica cover to cover and learning French and all these other things that you could be learning about. We're like sort of maybe driven by that instinct to survive in a weird way.
Threat detection, very primal.
Yeah, like once, like the survival thing is always like hardwired into our brain. But it's like, imagine if we're playing like World of Warcraft or some sort of RPG. There's a human species. The second we cross the threshold of like guaranteeing survival in the form of civilization, we've reached the end game. But all that experience learning how to survive still sticks in our head. It's the wisdom passed down through genes from generation to generation. So you still have to do something with that. So we start to learn threats in a different environment.
Well, and it proves how we've survived all this time, which is kind of like exactly what you just said, but I'm kind of phrasing it a bit differently. It's like us doing what our brains have done over centuries to keep us alive.
I wonder how much of it is also genetic knowledge.
Oh yeah, there's some epigenetics in there for sure. There's some studies that, still need to be maybe peer reviewed, or maybe further information has to be studied. But what's really interesting is some people are noticing that with epigenetics, you can have like a mom who goes through a really traumatic situation, passing down genetic knowledge to the kids, such that the kids predisposed towards anxiety or other forms of like subtle threat detection, that the genes are like, well, to survive you need to stay on alert, like I was taught to, in a weird way. And again, epigenetics, I don't know a lot. I really want to do an episode on it. But that generational knowledge is there on like a very, very encoded level, which is like an adaptation in some ways.
And then you get this concept too of spontaneous knowledge, right? Where you have like a monkey in Bora Bora learns how to use a particular stick to get termites out of a wood stump, and then all of a sudden a monkey in South America, like troops of monkeys all over the world start knowing the same thing.
That drives me nuts. That. No, I know.
Yeah.
You told me about that. Would you call it spontaneous knowledge?
Spontaneous knowledge, yeah. I think, I mean, like that's just, yeah. Anyways, go ahead, Mike.
Now we're drifting into like our psychic networks.
Yeah.
Right? Like how to communicate without language, and the more right now at least esoteric stuff, but how we're connected in those ways, right? Where we can do something like that as a species. Like the monkeys can do that as a species, or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, well, and that, like I do want to do another episode on muses, because I do think this idea of spontaneous knowledge, or the seed of inspiration, where you just get an idea that's like an original idea, that it's very juicy stuff.
Yeah.
I was just going to throw in that when you talk about the psychic network, it makes me think of the Absolute, like our first couple of episodes on the Gateway Experience. It's very interesting. Throw that out there.
Yep. You mean those CIA papers?
Yeah, man. I was actually going to try to do another declassified paper for today, but I got really wigged out. But like they have a whole bunch of them on poltergeists, apparently, and it's just so mind-boggling that you get these documents released and you realize like there were people tasked with, finding the truth of things that seem unknowable, which is just, and then documenting it in like a really staunch, rigid way.
Yeah, you have to. It has to be like formal and academic.
Right. Like a formal academic paper about poltergeists. It's just like really odd. And I don't know, it's scary.
I have to do some legwork, but it appears I found a book from the CIA on how to annoy people. To break somebody down. I'm like, yeah, this is useful, but it may not actually be from the CIA. It may be like some
disgruntled friend.
Yeah, or like some like disgruntled employee who retired and is like, or who like got laid off for a drinking problem or something, and it's like, oh, now I'm gonna make this book and claim that it's from the CIA. So I gotta check my sources, but the some of the stuff I was reading in it was pretty funny and pretty like it's worth sharing.
Nice. Well, this is good stuff, guys. Let's keep going on with Thoth. So his head is sometimes an ibis, sometimes a baboon. I didn't know what an ibis was, but apparently it was a bird that had a really long beak. And I wasn't really sure like why this bird, like birds don't have really big brains. What's up with that? But it turns out that Egyptians saw the curve of the ibis's beak as a symbol of the crescent moon. And when you have iterations of Thoth with the baboon head, he's holding up a crescent moon.
Mm-hmm.
Which is kind of interesting. The moon, so Thoth is kind of credited with knowledge, also geometry, and also astronomy. So it makes sense that he would be wedded to sort of this idea of the moon. Why a crescent moon? I'm not exactly sure. Maybe it's just alluding to the phases, kind of an easier symbol. But what's interesting about this particular ibis bird is that there's like some archaeologists that found out that the ibis bird was kind of farmed and used in a lot of rituals throughout like burial practices and things like that.
Yeah, it's probably like their chickens. But I also think that there's a purpose for the ibis as well, being that Thoth is Thoth and Hermes are the same deity in the Greek and the Egyptian traditions. Hermes being the god of fleet-footedness and sort of agility and cunning. It would make sense that you would have a sort of slender, agile-looking animal as the representation of that as well. More close to the human form than to, like, say, Sekhmet, who is depicted as a ferocious lioness. Because that idea of knowledge, again, we're kind of getting closer to the approximation of human. And the sort of concept of ethereal or mercurialness being attached with that. So you have a sort of more slender figure, you have a more lithe character as an archetype.
Right. Oh, I like that. Well, and I like this idea too, that maybe like because the ibis is sort of slender, maybe more agile, maybe the way it moves is kind of indicative of sort of that I think you said cunning was like, which is
grace, gracefulness as well.
Yeah. Well, and so it's interesting. It was the most common bird mummy in Egypt's underground catacombs, with more than 2 million found. 2 million ibis mummies have been discovered, and it's.
Could you imagine if that was your job? What do you do? I have to mummify the ibises, man.
Well, and apparently they took really good care of them, because in some of the ibis mummies, they would find like there was a broken wing or something, and it had been repaired. So they were, knowledgeable in how to care and maintain them, and then prepare them when it was time. Indeed, some think that it was likely due to a cult of Thoth that emerged and gained prominence during the late period of ancient Egypt, because millions of dead ibis were mummified and buried in Thoth's honor, which is also kind of weird. Like if this bird symbolizes this god, you think you wouldn't kill that bird, but maybe they died of natural causes. Like it just accumulated over time. Maybe
sacrifice, right? I mean,
Probably.
we have gods associate themselves with animals, and then we sacrifice those animals to, Zeus is the ram. We sacrifice a ram to Zeus. It's the same sort of like antiquity beliefs. Yeah. So usually gods have an animal that they are dedicated to, at least for sacrifices. So it would make sense that an ibis is one of those things.
Right. Well, and apparently they were sacrificially offered to Thoth at his annual festival. There was like a whole festival dedicated to him. And from one of the articles I read, they said that the ancient Egyptians actually thought the animals were incarnations of God on earth. So, I mean, that obviously is why they chose the bird. But again, I just
send them back.
Right. Right. It's kind of like weird to me. Like maybe they're trying to release his essence by, like alleviating his physical form, which would be kind of interesting. But what is really interesting also is that the birds disappeared entirely from Egypt around 1850. This was centuries after the cessation of the mummification practice. So it wasn't like they were mummified and sacrificed to extinction. They just disappeared, and it forever remains a very spooky mystery.
Probably black market hunting. I would say.
No. It was that people stopped honoring Thoth, and so the birds ceased to
Or rich
dematerialize.
Europeans wanted an Egyptian, ibis.
It dematerialized.
Okay, well, that's fine. That's fine. It could dematerialize. Who knows, man? I know there's a lot less pigeons today than there are.
But you saw one. You finally saw one.
I've seen one in 8 years.
Yeah, you could blame me for that. Pigeon's real good. That's like my favorite. I eat that for breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
We call it squaw. Okay.
You've never deep fried a pigeon, like a whole pigeon?
I'm sure it's fine. Yeah.
You deep fry it and you just bite the head first. You hear a little pop of the eyeball and the crisp.
Have you really eaten pigeon before?
No.
Oh, what to say? I was like, oh my gosh.
I was borrowing stories from my great grandfather's fishing tales. So you would like catch a fish. He would make fish eye like a fish head soup, and then in front of you he would take the eyeball and like pop it like on his like canines.
Yummy. Mm-hmm.
Wow.
And he would look at you because your response is like, and then he would laugh at you.
Mm-hmm.
So I was borrowing elements from that story and then just throwing in pigeons and deep fried.
I like
food.
it. I like it. Yeah, it's like short fiction quality right there. It's just got a big visual.
Now the audience is gonna think like in the day when like my code is compiling or something, I'm out there. You got two pigeons.
I think it's also probably worth noting as far as the ibis sacrifice thing is that the Egyptians' attitude towards death. I mean, they were a culture that didn't see death as like anything to be sad about. It was just a continuation into the process, into the duat, into the underworld, all of that stuff. So I mean, like it would make sense they were heavy on the sacrifice. I'm glad that the Egyptians were just using animals to sacrifice. Instead of
farmed
humans,
animals, FYI.
Farmed animals, yeah. It seems like they have their S together.
Humans are animals. I'm just saying.
Yes, that's true. That's true.
But it was interesting.
They're not ibises.
You're correct. They are not ibises.
That's right.
There is a Simpsons
I
episode.
can say that for sure.
Those are two different animals.
I don't want to get cocky here, but I think that's true.
There's a Simpsons episode where like a kid fell into a meat grinder during Sloppy Joe night, and so then like Principal Skinner and all the teachers were like, "This is the best."
All the
yeah,
students.
they started like farming the kids, and then it was really funny because they had a moment where they had one kid in a room, and then he's like, "Oh, go join the free range kids." It was really wrong, but it was a funny like Halloween Simpsons episode, and anyway. Cool. Well, Mike, any thoughts as to why the ibis may have disappeared?
Why the ibis may have disappeared?
Do you think it's spooky, or is it like rational?
How far down the rabbit hole do you want to go? How far did you go with those?
Not too far. I mean, just a little, like a little toe off the deep end, but not that far. No, I didn't go too far. I mean, like, it's one of those things where sometimes you have to understand other gods and other stories and this and that, and I didn't go that far. So, more casual kind of summary, but we could take a little bit.
I will say I don't know. I don't know why the ibis disappeared.
I don't know.
Who
am I? I don't know.
I wasn't there, man.
I wasn't there.
Sorry.
Right. Yeah.
I know I have like team meeting vibes where it's like someone asks you a direct question.
Also,
I don't know.
I think conforms the answer to your question. Well, like it really depends on on how far you went with this. That's all. So I mean, like I'll reserve like. Yeah,
we
I
can
don't know.
loop back
I'll
to
just
it.
say
I
I don't
have
know.
a magic section later where we can play with ideas and stuff like that.
I think it might be also just pretty easy. Is that maybe ibises weren't native to Egypt and they were brought over by a pharaoh that really liked them, and since they were farmed, they had to have been probably taken care of for at least a while. And then the native population died out because they weren't native to Egypt.
And we're not an invasive species that can easily thrive.
Yeah, right.
You know what's interesting about that is there's a type of salmon that was organic to California, like it originated here. At some point, people took that salmon to Australia. And so Australia, the salmon population for that particular type of salmon are getting sick and dying. And so there's actually like an organization, or I don't know how they did it, but they are bringing the salmon back to Northern California specifically, and to the tribes that are familiar with the practices of helping them thrive. And I think the state is helping to support the salmon migration because they built a big dam, which is part of what messed things up. But they're going to create like an alternative mode of transportation or something for these salmon and bring them back to California. That's like a nice little happy story I thought I'd share.
Oh,
I don't know if that's relevant to anything, but but it's kind of what Nick was saying.
yeah, that's fair.
So cool. Well, so moving on, Thoth also had a temple. A lot of the temple had been destroyed before the beginning of the Christian era, but it is very like its frontage is still standing. And it's really beautiful. Now, I had a hard time looking up some of the images because apparently Thoth's temple also appears in Assassin's Creed. And so it's really funny if you Google image search that temple, you're going to get a lot of like really different images that pop up. And
that's the psyop right there. So Assassin's Creed was specifically created to start erasing history.
Wait, really?
Yeah,
no.
Man.
What?
Yeah.
What?
Yeah. Because now when you look up these ancient temples, all you're seeing is Assassin's Creed.
Oh,
no,
yeah.
I'm kidding.
No, it's like hyper reality or something like that. No. But I do.
Yeah, man. I remember before Assassin's Creed, like 200 years ago, when I would look up the Thoth of the Temple of Thoth,
you would get the Temple
best
of Thoth.
Images, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
But now when you look it up, all you
Creed.
get is Assassin's Creed.
Yep.
Right. Well, and then it's funny because like this is the deity of knowledge. And so this whole time I'm like, looking at an archaeological paper here, a wiki article here, a magic blog over here, and I'm Googling images. And it's just interesting how part of the connection with Thoth is about writing. Now, our internet's sort of this new type of writing where images and facts and thoughts are sort of dispensed in a cloud verse, but it dilutes the knowledge and yet at the same time supports it. And whatever that means, it's just some food for thought. Got me thinking.
Does knowledge necessarily have to be factual?
That's why I opened the beginning with what is knowledge. It's hard. I don't know. I mean, like, because knowledge and facts, that's a problematic word, and I don't want to get into like the semantics of it, but at the same time I get what you're asking.
Yeah,
because
like
even
you can have knowledge, but it can be false.
Yeah, like you can be knowledgeable about Assassin's Creed. Legit. I mean, it's not real, but you're still knowledgeable about the game.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm like, imagine if so like you have no idea what Assassin's Creed is, but I told you that
Wrong. No.
This is a thought experiment. Calm down.
Okay.
But I told you that Assassin's Creed was a story about a bear that found a human and taught the human how to walk like a horse, and then the bear rode the horse across some place to another place.
Wait, the bear rode the human who's acting like a horse? That's
yeah.
dope. I'd watch that.
Yeah, right. But I told you that's what Assassin's Creed was. So
Okay.
now you have some knowledge of Assassin's Creed. That doesn't mean it's
Mm.
true.
Well,
Right.
and that
right.
underscores that
Mhm.
underscores the other side of Thoth, Hermes Trismegistus, which is hidden knowledge, and knowledge that is kept behind closed doors, which all of the secret schools of Egypt and Greece were all about. So you would have false information, like Mike's explanation of what Assassin's Creed is like, but inside that false information would be the true information as well. So you could sandwich truth inside lies and still come out with knowledge for the initiated and
Just-
not nonsense for the uninitiated.
Just like The
Mm.
Shining was actually about Stanley Kubrick's apology.
Apollo 13 or the moon landing,
What?
bro. Come on. The kid's even wearing the sweater.
Oh my god! What is
Apollo
this?
11. Sorry. Apollo
What?
11.
Yeah, like the one of the big conspiracy. It's one of the sillier ones. Like I
Yeah.
enjoy it. But yeah, that The Shining, the Stanley Kubrick's The Shining. He's actually apologizing for faking the moon landing.
Uh-huh.
It's my favorite. But yeah, that's like the sort of hidden knowledge, right?
Mhm.
Think about the meta narrative of Eyes Wide Shut. Same thing. It's a hidden knowledge sort of tell.
The occult.
Oh,
Yes.
I see. Well, yeah, and I mean, like, and thanks, Mike, for teasing out that little thought experiment, because that's exactly what I was thinking about with this idea of like blogs and Googles and Wiki. It's all distilled information. Some of it got filtered through, authority figures. Some of it didn't. And that doesn't necessarily mean that one's automatically right or wrong, depending, like information's always sort of changing and shifting and getting hacked and all that weird stuff. So, yeah, I don't know what I'm saying. I guess just in
Information
this
should always be fluid. I mean, especially, like if it's not in a vacuum, factors change, variables change.
Yeah, entropy's a thing.
Yeah. Science isn't settled. Science will never be settled because science is a process of finding information and truth, and that process never ends, whether to our
Absolutely.
detriment or not.
Well, and I've been reading Bruce Lee's Jeet Kune Do, and in a lot of the beginning parts of the book, he talks a lot about emptying your mind. And I think this is really interesting too, because you can amass all of this knowledge and then you can get hung up on, is this factual? Is it not? Is this true? Is it not? Can I trust this? Can I not? Is it a secret? Whatever. But in order to maybe act or exert your will or sift through it, I do think that there's a requirement to sort of like empty your mind and sit and have that peace. Maybe that's that thoughtful reflection component, to sort of consider it and be like, well, how am I filtering this or something? I don't know. Does that resonate?
It's like an old Chinese proverb, right? It's like you can't fill your cup unless you empty it. I think that's the proverb, which is the same concept of like, when you're trying to learn something new, it's best to sort of shed your preconceived ideas about what you're learning. And this is particularly in the realm of martial arts. We used to do that all the time. Like, I think I've been to different martial arts styles, and almost every time I've had the sensei say, like, when you come here, you have to empty your cup of the prior knowledge that you've had before. I think that's even in the Zen Cone somewhere.
Yeah. And, it's really interesting too, because sometimes in the pursuit of knowledge, also you need to empty that out. Yeah. And just be sort of that blank slate where anything becomes possible and you can sort of be steered to accept the information coming.
Yeah, hopefully if you have a good mentor.
If you have a good mentor, right.
Yeah, Big Mike in the chat, he says he's learning Spanish with an app. Is it Duolingo or Babbel? Neither of them are sponsored by this show, so we're not really. It doesn't really matter.
Unfortunately, but if you want to sponsor this show, you can contact us at awesomepeople@exofathom.com. No, I don't even know that we have an email address.
Great email address.
Make it so. Cool. Well, so Thoth, let's see. There's a lot of interesting mythology around him. Where am I going with this section? Let's see. So, I guess we could skip this one. I was going to talk a little bit about the idea of like worshiping deities and how like integral that was to living then, but it's less so now. And I've always thought about this with sort of gods that have temples built to them, and it used to have people who were devoted to the worship of them. And is it a chicken of the egg kind of thing where they existed as long as they were worshipped and then went away when they weren't?
Well, that's the Neil Gaiman approach, right? With the American gods. That's the whole premise.
Oh,
is that
right.
gods only exist as long as they're being worshipped, and you have these old sets of gods that are losing their powers while these new sets of gods rise. But yeah, I mean, worship is important. I wonder if the sort of like one-stop shop of monotheism took something away from praying to the god of rain and praying to the god of wind and praying to the god of harvest. It would seem it made it easier for people. You have to imagine how many temples do you got to go to in a day?
Gosh,
like
absolutely.
I got to go to the temple of, the temple of Zeus. Then I got to go to the temple of Demeter. Then I got to go to the temple of Poseidon because I'm going to take a ship soon. You know what I mean?
And now we just call that errands. I got to go to the temple of Target, then the temple of Whole Foods, then the temple of TJ Maxx, the temple of Exxon.
Absolutely.
Well, and I think I put this section in because I was thinking about the Prometheus story. And at one of those points, you were talking about this transition in offerings to the gods, such that they used to give the gods the best food, the best cuts of meat. But then because of Prometheus's activities, they were now giving the leftovers. And then you see that become nothing. And so I'm just curious about like having done the Prometheus episode. Does anything sort of come to mind?
Yeah. To me, honestly, it's the Gnostic idea. We've talked about this too in the car. I think the Gnostic idea of becoming God. So there was a departure in the sort of attitude about God, probably, I don't know, within the mystery school era, probably within ancient Greece and ancient Egypt, where instead of externalizing God, they started to internalize God. And then you have this Gnostic idea that the ultimate meaning of life is to become God yourself. And so it would make sense that the rise in that sort of belief also probably took a little bit of attention away from gods, but not too much, because obviously we've seen the role of religion over the several thousand years. But yeah, it does to me seem a little bit Gnostic, where it's like you stop sacrificing to the gods, but then you're sort of putting yourself in that place, because it's ultimately like you want to become that Ubermensch, the over person, the person that's beyond humanity. And that's kind of what we struggle with. We struggle with this idea that we want to transcend humanity as humans. Like we look at our human base selves as animals, and we look to the future as if we're going to sort of transcend these mortal trappings, coils. Yes. And
with our big brains.
Yes. Ascend to the level of God through intellect, through reason, through knowledge.
Essentially striving for omniscience through knowledge.
Absolutely.
Proximity to.
Yeah.
No, makes sense. And, the other funny question I had with this particular section is that part of the Thoth mythology is that he is one of the two deities, the other being Mat. I don't know if it's M-A-At. Then they stood on either side of Ra's solar bark. I don't even know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but that is a vessel that was used by the sun god Ra in ancient Egyptian mythology. Ra was said to use a vessel that was referred to as the boat of millions of years. And the vessel is used Oh, that was a vessel used during the day, but then during the nighttime, he used another vessel. The ancient Egyptian word was mesektet, I think, but they didn't provide the definition. But I did like this idea of the boat of millions of years because that signals sort of experiential knowledge, millions of knowledge that is propelling him through the day. And I thought to myself, well, it's a boat because they had boats back then. So if we had Egyptian gods today, if we still believed in Ra and Thoth, would they still be on boats or would they be in like Teslas or planes or helicopters? Like, you know what I mean? Because I think about that sometimes. Like, if those traditions held true, would they spill over and be adapted to modern times, in some alternate reality where
we're
that
getting
happens.
to this like ship of Theseus question, right? If Thoth isn't
Yes.
coming back on an Egyptian barge, is he actually Thoth? I don't know, right?
Yeah.
I would say you're touching a lot on American gods too, right? Because this is the way they illustrate sort of the modern gods like internet and Mr. World, is that they're very modern. They're very modern looking. They don't look like Odin and Thor and all of that stuff.
And it's a brilliant story. I have yet to read, but I've heard so many good things about that author.
It's a little hokey. I like Neil Gaiman. I'm not going to be like, I don't attack me, fanboys. But the writing is a little hokey. Like there's a guy named Loki in it. And it's like, we're being a little on the nose with that, but okay.
Maybe that. You could forgive that if there's like 9 goods for that one not good. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
My brain's a bit tired.
Still worth a look.
It's still worth a look.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, just a little more on Thoth mythology. His feminine counterpart was Seshat. Seshat? Do you think it would be? Seshet. And his wife was Maat. Matt. So his wife would have been the Egyptian goddess of writing, wisdom, and knowledge. So pretty similar, sort of like a foil, same but different. She was seen as a scribe and a record keeper. Her name means female scribe, and credited with inventing writing. She also became identified as the goddess of accounting, architecture, astronomy, astrology, building, mathematics, and surveying. Whereas Matt refers to the ancient Egyptian concepts of truth, balance, order, harmony, law, morality, and justice. And as the goddess who personified these concepts, she also regulated the stars, the seasons, and the actions of mortals, and the deities who brought order from chaos at the moment of creation. Tall order of activities for this one. And what's interesting is the ostrich feather is a symbol of the goddess Maat, that deified personification of truth and order. And so the god Thoth, in his role as judge, often has connections to this concept. So in the Hall of Judgment in the Egyptian underworld, Thoth would weigh the deceased's heart against a Maat feather in order to judge how he or she lived. And I just really love how these concepts fit together. When you think about the relationship of these characters, these deities, but then you think about the relationship of the sort of words that they personify, and you think about what that means in terms of the relationship to knowledge and judgment and writing and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, he's literally a gatekeeper.
Yeah.
I mean, what do you do to knowledge if you want to keep it from people?
Is knowledge worth gatekeeping?
Probably. I mean, according to the Eleusinian schools and all of the ancient secret societies, yes, but I don't know. I mean, I think knowledge always outs itself eventually. Or information.
Have you ever heard a little bit of wisdom? You do not cast pearls before swine.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I mean that's yes. I mean that's
how I feel about knowledge. I feel like if there are no gatekeepers with knowledge, then Yeah. Then everybody
Who's the
runs.
swine, Mike? Who's the swine?
Me, I'm the swine.
Oh, okay.
But if you don't have gatekeepers towards knowledge, you're into a Cassandra situation really fast on a societal level, which will break the society, I feel like.
There it is.
Sure. Yeah.
Makes
I mean,
sense.
are we designed for omniscience? No. And I think we see that pretty clearly in our modern times.
There's
this is the closest we've gotten to it.
You know, it was really interesting. And back in the day when I knew this person, I respected this person. This person was very intelligent. But I personally had feelings of malice towards this person because I was young and dumb, and this person had a little bit more wisdom than I. But we were talking, and he and I both knew that we knew what we were talking about, whatever the hell we were talking about. And he goes, I have to be a gatekeeper for these reasons. And at the time, it didn't make sense to me. And it's only as I got like a year or two older that it finally kicked in of like, no, he's right. Yeah, there are certain sets of knowledge. If you have the knowledge, you have to gatekeep. Only because the person that's like trying to get through the gate doesn't understand the full context of the knowledge that they're trying to get.
Now you're talking kind of like that book, The Giver, where you have knowledge bearers and they're entrusted with the burden of memory and knowledge.
Yeah, and it's a shitty situation because it doesn't sound good that somebody gatekeeps, but it's like a necessary evil, like in The Giver. It's like it's a very bizarre thing.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think because knowledge shouldn't be free anyways. I mean, it's not free now. There's no such thing as free knowledge. You have to search it. You have to look for it. So, I mean, I don't necessarily disagree that I don't disagree at all. I think that, gatekeeping is kind of just a natural process of that. The people who put in the time and the effort to find that knowledge tend to be there at the threshold of that knowledge, waiting for others to find them. And,
kind of like
gatekeepers.
But you're hinting at that thing where it's like when the pupil is ready, the master will appear kind of thing.
Yeah, I think that's probably more apt. I mean, especially when you're getting into sort of complex ideas and systems and stuff like that, the layman isn't going to be privy or even aware to go search that knowledge out. So there's almost kind of a natural filter in knowledge in of itself that the people that you want to kind of keep away from it tend not to look for it anyways, or tend to look for it less than the people who are, trying to access it.
So you can scatter the pearls. Pig just goes around it.
Pig doesn't even notice. Pig probably just eats them.
Yeah, pig eats. Yeah. But yeah, no, that's something with the pig. Yeah, no, it's like you also have to check the people that are half-hearted. There are some things that once you learn, you cannot unlearn. There are some wisdoms once you find like that double-edged sword. So
like the Matrix.
If you really want to know, you can know, but you have to prove to the gatekeeper that you want to know and deal with. Yeah, and deal with and be mature enough to deal with the burden of the knowledge that you're taking on.
I'm a little bit more libertarian about it. I think let them deal with it themselves. If somebody can't handle knowledge, then it'll go out into the world and we'll have this free market of knowledge.
Or an epic moment. You can't handle the truth.
Free market of knowledge. Release the knowledge.
Sure. Or you get Ted Kaczynski.
Yeah.
Take your choice.
He was, look, he definitely had his issues with the Postal Service, but he really was kind of just sequestered from all humanity.
He was one of those got pushed though down.
Very isolated.
But he got pushed down the knowledge path real hard by academic institutions, and that's
and he arrived at the idea that ignorance was better.
No, he just lacked wisdom. He never got to integrate that. And I think that, again, I found this true in school. If you just constantly have knowledge flowing at you, and you go to your lectures and then you go home and you read your books, you do your homework, you go to your lectures, you go home, you read your books, you do your homework. It's that all work, no play. You're never giving your brain a chance to actually absorb, and you don't have that sort of fallow time, which a lot of creatives need to sort of absorb the information, turn the brain off so that the subconscious can pick up that truth nugget, chew on it, and then integrate it into your experience and understanding, give you better questions, and also just that pause. Because I think we don't realize how much we need rest a lot of the times, especially how rest propels learning.
Yeah, I think that's more of like the digestion of information. Like what's your information metabolism? What's your knowledge metabolism? How much
It's
can you
good to
handle at
know.
once? Yeah.
How
No,
fast
it
can you
is.
knowledge?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes.
Well, and what's funny too about
Do you
knowledge.
do you get really what would you call it? Knowledge obese?
Hey, as long as it's healthy, you shit post right, you're never knowledge obese.
There you go. All right. I like it.
Say, yeah. Well, anyway.
Hey, one shit post away keeps the knowledge proctologist away. I don't know.
The knowledge proctologist.
That rhymes.
It does. Yes.
We're gonna need to workshop that.
I don't
a
know
bit,
why you're
guys.
storing your knowledge there, but yes.
Problematic. We're gonna workshop this moving forward. So back to some of the myth.
I have some family that would call me a butthead, so it only makes sense that the brain's
Hey,
there.
there you go. I like it. Nice.
We're gonna workshop that. Circle back. So just one more little mythological story that I thought was kind of fun. Egyptian mythology actually credits Thoth with the creation of the 365-day calendar, a fact that Nick is overjoyed and enthusiastic about.
No,
I'm
I
just
was
kidding.
yawning and then I cracked my jaw.
I just looked over and this
So that's a
loud
really
yawn.
Loud pop.
Anyway, what? Oh,
No.
Yeah.
Derail. I was going to talk about. Just go.
I mean, if you guys want a 2-hour episode, we can do that.
No, carry on. Carry on.
Okay, cool. Carry on my way.
Oh, I was going Sticks. I was going carry on. Oh no, sorry. Queen.
Oh, wait,
Bohemian
how does that?
Rhapsody.
Oh,
Carry on
yes,
as if nothing really mattered.
Oh, such a good song. Well, what's interesting about this little mythology is that it demonstrates Thoth's ability to sort of like use his cunning and ingenuity. So there is a marriage between Nuit and Geb, and I don't know who these people are. I mean, these deities. All I know is that Ra decreed that because it angered him that one of them couldn't bear children during any month of the year. And so Nuit, that was Nuit, was the Egyptian sky goddess, born of Shu, god of air, and Tefnuit, goddess of water and fertility. So it's kind of like a double jab, right? Like you would think, but you can't. So Thoth took pity on Nuit and played a game with the moon, the regulator of time. This is also kind of interesting about the crescent symbol with Thoth. But because of this game, it allowed him to create an extra 5 days in the year. What was the game? It was a gambling game with the moon. But this is kind of interesting. It was the gamble was for 1/72nd of its light. And I don't know exactly what the gambling was, but the winner got 1/72nd of the moon's light. And then for some reason, 360 divided by 72 equaled 5.
Yeah.
So,
That's an occult number, 72.
Is it? What is it? 72 what?
I don't know exactly, but you
72
have also...
hens a clucking.
No, but if
this
you wanted...
is mummying.
Yeah, but if you wanted to go into the Islamic tradition, you have 72 virgins awaiting you in paradise. 72 has been a very... 72 is an occult number.
Why? So, why? This is the thing that has befuddled me. Why
The
would you
numbers?
want 72 virgins? Wouldn't you want
Dude.
somebody a bit more experienced?
No, no.
No, why not?
Because it's about modesty, Mike. We're not.
I'm sorry. I apologize.
Get your
My
Western,
Not this type of show.
get your Western degeneracy out of here.
Oh, I'm so sorry if you don't understand the pleasures of life.
Anyway,
Anyways,
I'm glad
bring
that
us
you
back on
brought
the
up
rails,
the
Ayla. Come on.
occult. Yeah, choo
I
choo,
apologize.
chicka. So Nick brought up some of the occult, and so I'm going to preface this next section by saying that the show does not condone any of these beliefs. I don't know that these are real, and actually, I will just let the listeners know if you go onto YouTube and type in Thoth prophecy, you are going to see all manner of interesting video. And I don't really know what to make of it. I don't know enough information about what's substantiated and what's not. But it is kind of interesting. I saw one that sort of described this prophecy of civilization reaching a point of knowledge where it abandons deities and embraces sort of this, like Nick was saying, agnostic point of view to its destruction, or the point of destruction, at which point God, quote unquote, returns, worship returns, and we cycle back.
Ooh, a little bit of the Gnostic and the Christian. All right, I like it.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting when you look at kind of the way that like the Egyptian god Thoth and the Greek god Hermes merged, and especially in the Roman Empire, that became this sort of cult figure. And
There's also Mithra in Iran.
That's so
why they
Thoth,
call him
Hermes, and Mithra.
That's why they call him Hermes Trismegistus. He's the thrice majestic. It means he was worshipped by three great civilizations:
Wow.
Persia, Greece, and Egypt. Yeah,
Got it. Well, and it's interesting because I was reading through a lot of like, I was trying to go through some of the history, some of the mythology, some of the religious kind of discussions about it to sort of filter out the fringe ideas about all of this. And it was kind of interesting. Like you said, Trismegistus, I didn't know that, but that makes a lot of sense because this sort of knowledge deity or this wisdom keeper plays a really important role, and it evolves over time. Because the Romans, they came to believe that Hermes was responsible for all human knowledge based on what they knew about the Egyptian god Thoth, which is an important rival to early Christianity. And the cult of Hermes was sort of this really popular thing. Many magical ideas from the Renaissance up to present day were spawned by the cult.
Unlike a lot of other deities in the pantheons of Egyptian and Greece and sort of Roman, they all believed 100% that Thoth, Hermes Trismegistus was an actual entity that visited them.
Yeah.
So when they say that
that
he created their hieroglyphs, they literally mean that he visited their civilization and taught them how to write.
Yeah, no, I read that. And there's this really interesting transition from him as a deity to him as maybe a man, which is the same thing that they did to Jesus, right? Maybe he's a man, no, he's a deity or a son of a deity or whatnot. And what I do really think is interesting is that you've got the Greeks who came to Egypt after the conquests of Alexander the Great, absorbing very important Egyptian deities into their pantheon, including Thoth. And the Greeks assuming that Thoth and Hermes must be the same person, as with many other gods and heroes in the pantheon. And then the merger of Thoth and Hermes, their respective stories led to sort of Hellenic Greeks wondering, had this god once roamed the earth, dishing out knowledge to humans? And so this little article goes on to say that Greco-Roman Egypt would have flourished as the global center for intellectual achievement with its new great library in Alexandria. And it is perhaps no surprise that the god of writing and learning would become the subject of intense devotion in this highly literate pagan melting pot. And in fact, they renamed a city in Egypt to Hermopolis, the city of Hermes. And then Hermes' reputation soared, and he came known as Hermes Trismegistus, which means 3 times the great. Under the Romans, it wouldn't take long before texts appeared claiming to contain this primordial philosophy written by Hermes himself. So the writings of Hermes, known as Hermetica, attracted this cult following and were influenced by Egyptian religion, Jewish and early Christian ideas, and Greek philosophy. So again, I like this idea of this melting pot. And I like this idea of a melting pot centered around writings and knowledge and being able to compare ancient knowledge with current knowledge, spirituality and practice with maybe future aspirations. And I should stop there because I feel like you guys both are thinking. Any thoughts? Any thoughts? I can keep going.
What happened?
Oh, no. Okay. You guys both look so contemplative. I wasn't sure if you wanted to say.
I was giving Mike a shot to say something.
No, I'm just sitting here listening and thinking.
Oh, yeah.
Keep going. You're good.
Okay. It's just very interesting stuff, because then you get into the Hermetic writings. And again, here, let's see. Oh, interesting. So yeah, there's like this popular spin of Platonic philosophy where they discuss ideas like contemplation, reincarnation, purification of the soul, and ultimately divine salvation. The texts are written in dialogue with Hermes receiving divine knowledge from the Nous, which is the divine mind, and then he teaches his knowledge to various Greek and Egyptian gods and mythological characters. But they say that the cult of the god Hermes was essentially a form of pagan Gnosticism, a belief system that holds divine knowledge can be received directly by a worthy acolyte, and the deserving seeker comes to know God directly through religious experiences. So there's that word again, experience. I just think it's interesting. It's just interesting stuff.
I'm sure it played a big role in I think the Eleusis. Eleusis was one of the hidden schools in Greece where they used a lot of psychedelics psychedelics. And,
I heard about this.
Yeah.
They didn't have it confirmed until they found a pot.
Yes,
and they scraped the
Yeah, they just recently, I think this just came out like a couple weeks ago or something like that. They scraped one of the pots that they found in Eleusis and they found ergot in the pot. So it's pretty well confirmed that they were using lysergic acid, sort of proto-lysergic acid, as a gateway to Thoth and sort of that knowledge realm.
Yeah,
what's lysergic acid?
LSD.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And what's really it's kind of creepy that we both responded so quickly. I've been watching Michael Pollan's documentary on Netflix, so it's so funny. But the Book of the Dead also mentions Thoth. In the Papyrus of Ani copy, the scribe proclaims, quote, "I am thy writing palette, O Thoth, and I have brought unto thee thine ink jar. I am not of those who work iniquity in their secret places. Let not evil happen to me." And it's the oldest, the Book of the Dead is one of the oldest traditions, said to be the work of Thoth himself. And I think he's got like the third book or something. And what I thought was really fascinating is Plato, the man himself, mentions Thoth in his dialogue. Phaedrus uses the myth of Thoth to demonstrate that writing leads to laziness and forgetfulness. And in the story, Thoth remarks to King Thamus of Egypt that writing is a wonderful substitute for memory. Thamus, which sounds a lot like thalamus, remarks that it is a remedy for reminding, not remembering, with the appearance, but not the reality of wisdom. Future generations will hear much without being properly taught and will appear wise, but not be so.
Oof.
Right? It just hits you in the gut, all this kind of like wisdom mythology.
You can take that and look at the parallel in North America. So you take like the indigenous tribes that were here pre-Columbian exposure, and everything was shared through an oral tradition. So memory was writing. You were not. That's the stories were told over and over through generation to generation. You remembered, and they had verbal maps of the area that they existed in most of the nomadic tribes through the areas that they would go through. It wasn't until post-Columbian exposure that you find writing becoming a thing. But yeah, no, it's very true that writing it's used to remind you, but it doesn't substitute memory. And I find that very interesting that across the world, the same thing is being brought up.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
it makes you wonder how much writing has degradated, whatever word you want to
Degraded.
use.
Either one.
Yeah, all right. Has screwed up our memory.
Made not good.
Yeah.
No, that's the same argument they made against calculators. Do you remember how
Wow.
like calculators?
Hey,
There's
I
a
had
big
a
hullabaloo about bringing calculators into the
so
classroom.
I'll be real with you. I had one teacher that did not allow us any calculators. It was in community
Oh.
college. He was my favorite math professor,
I bet
but
it was.
he was absolutely correct. My ability to do arithmetic became much quicker without a calculator than using I was able to do problems or like sub problems of the main problem faster without a calculator
Makes sense.
with enough training versus with a calculator.
Yeah, simply
Right.
put, do any of you know any number in your contact list?
I know my dad's.
That's good. I
Right.
mean, but that's exactly it, right? You know, like we use
We
these.
used to.
These are our emerald tablets now. These are our emerald
You
tablets.
went there.
Yep.
Yes, Google it. Google it. Thoth and emerald tablets and find some freaky stuff on the internet. Like it's so
Ooh.
hard to distill what is going on with it all. But
And I really enjoy the emerald tablets.
and what's really funny too about what were you just saying? About like oral language and writing. So I was listening to this interview with a Navajo man. You know, he's younger, but he's training to be a Hatathli, which is medicine man or road runner. But you know, he was talking about how like there's only so many ceremonies that they do a year, and there's only certain ceremonies that you can do seasonally. And that you can't write any of it down. So you have to attend these ceremonies repeatedly to memorize the songs and the systems and the approach. And he said that like it could be 10, 20 years and you would maybe experience it 100 times, you know, along with a whole bunch of others with these huge gaps. And you just think about, you know, if a cab driver in New York has his brain structurally changed because he's driving routes all day and just starts memorizing major streets and cutaways and all this stuff, just imagine how your brain would change if rather than scribing these songs and these practices, you internalized it, lived it, experienced it over and over and over, sort of like your math class. And how that just kind of elevates your understanding of the material to a different level because you're so enmeshed in it.
And
Yeah,
just
so-
like the Ouroboros, we go in a full circle between the distinction of knowledge and wisdom.
See what I
Yeah.
did there?
So this starts. So like if you take London taxi drivers, you put them under some medical machine that looks at your brain and tells you the thing.
MRI?
I don't literally
Functional
probably
MRI?
I literally
CAT
don't give
scan?
a shit about. It's the machine that you put yourself in to get a picture of your brain.
Does it knock? Okay, sorry.
Does it knock?
Yeah,
Like-
MRIs, they're like dot, dot, dot,
Knock
dot,
like an
dot,
arrow.
Not-
Oh,
not-
can you
not-
imagine if like an MRI had a bone arrow? Never mind. Yeah, no, I believe it's an MRI. But they found that in the prefrontal cortex in certain areas of London cabbies that it's actually expanded. And it's because they have so much experience figuring out
Mhm.
routes and figuring out the city that they know it so well that your brain's a muscle, so it overdeveloped in that area.
Do you want to hear something crazy? So part of that is that, you know, brains have a certain level of plasticity. And during critical ages, I think it's like, God, I don't know if it's 18 to 31 or if it's 12 to 27, but somewhere in your late teens and 20s, maybe 30s, there's this thing that happens that's called like pruning. And your brain basically unless something's repeated or flagged as important, your brain just like prunes it and is like, don't need that, don't need that, don't need that, don't need that. So it makes sense that the people that are repeating these practices over and over and over, brains like, oh, this is important, keep this and keep this and keep this and keep this tangential memory and this and this.
What?
Well, sorry. Go for it. I've been talking.
No, it's cool. I was just going to bring up on an aside, bringing up back to the sort of the burden of knowledge, right? So you're a taxi cab driver in London. You got these newlyweds that are late for their flight to their honeymoon, right? They have 15 minutes, but you as the taxi driver, they get in your car. They're like, we need to get there. We need to get to Heathrow Airport right now. And he's thinking in his head, bing, 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 bing. Yeah, sorry, I can't get you any faster than 23 minutes. And you're gonna miss your flight. You know what I mean? But meanwhile, yeah, exactly. The newlyweds who don't have the knowledge of this taxi driver still think, oh, we might be able to make it. We might be able to make it. And I think that's the little bit of the demystification that I was talking about. Whereas I understand where, knowledge has like its need for precision and on all of that stuff too. I wonder if there is a little bit of that demystification of hope or something else there that kind of ruins the spice of life a little bit.
Yeah, but I mean, that's the same thing with everything, right? Like once you figure out what it is, you figure out what it is. Mm-hmm. That's also how ignorance shapes our reality, right? The couple in the back is ignorant to the city of London, so they think it's going to be 15 minutes or less.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And then the cabbie driver knows that it's not going to be. But still, he might be ignorant of some secret route through a couple of back alleys. You cut through a couple of red lights, make a left, or I'm sorry, it's the Queen's system. So you make a right. Yes. You're supposed to make a left or some bullshit. It's called the right side of the road for a damn as an American. I'm sorry.
So, my horror is that I'd have to drive somewhere in London. It's like an absolute horror story for me.
Really enjoyed driving in New Zealand, but I have issues where the steering column is placed. But anyways, New Zealand. Yeah, I know. Right?
Steering column. What does that even mean? Was it shaking?
This little thing blocks your view in a really unintuitive way that this side doesn't block. But no, so the ignorance of the driver also plays into the effect of the reality that's happening within the situation. This is where you get the multiple holograms that we talked about in our CIA episode. The gateway experience all plug in together.
It all comes together.
Yeah,
makes sense since this is episode 99. Yeah. Building up to the circle back. Well, and just bringing it back to one last thing about writing, I thought this one article is really interesting. They said that Artapanus of Alexandria, and forgive me if any of this is incorrect or anything, but I'm trusting, hopefully it's okay. But they were just saying that there was this person who lived in the 3rd or 2nd century BC who sort of so it's a researcher who took this view of Thoth Hermes as sort of being a historical human rather than a deity, and claimed that he was actually the same person as Moses, based primarily on their shared roles as authors of texts and creators of laws. And it's really interesting because this writer's biography of Moses conflates traditions about Moses and Thoth and invents many details about the two. And many later authors from late antiquity to the Renaissance either identified Hermes Trismegistus with Moses or regarded them as contemporaries who expounded similar beliefs. So again, just conjecture, but it makes me think again, from what I understand of the story of Moses, there's word written on tablets by God, and he's tasked with sharing that.
Except
he breaks one.
Oh, does he?
Yeah. There are
Bummer.
15 commandments, and he breaks the tablet, and he's like, "All right, 10 commandments."
Oh no.
Yeah,
And it looks like we've lost Mike, but
he
I'm
got
sure
booted.
he'll
He'll
pop
be
back
back.
in.
Yeah, definitely.
But I thought it was kind of just interesting, this idea of in our historical mythology and historical memory and mythology, we have these characters, these archetypes who are
Yeah.
knowledge bearers and who also brought knowledge into word
Yeah.
or into
Oh,
words.
So Moses, let me think. There was a thought I had. Hold on just a second. I wonder, oh yeah, that's what I was going to ask you. So, I mean, if we are to take these ancient peoples at face value and say that there was this actual entity called Hermes Trismegistus or Thoth or Mithra or whatever you want to call it.
Mithra.
Mithra was the Persian.
Oh gosh, I'm thinking of
Yeah.
Mothra. Never mind.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Or Mithras if you want to.
Mithras.
But yeah, I'm wondering, like, if they were insistent that he was an actual being, what do we think? What do we like? Is this a human we're talking about? This some sort of super genius that was just anomalous and had like the highest intellect out of all the people? Or are we thinking like some sort of extra dimensional figure, extraterrestrial figure? What do we think?
Well, and this is why I made that preamble about Google X, Y, and Z on YouTube, because there is a lot of theory about all of that. And, we have Mike on the comment thread who did mention Prometheus, part of the Aliens movie series. And I'm a big fan of that movie. Also, thank you, Mike, for commenting and watching with us. But in that movie, they have this idea where aliens seeded humans and basically like had some sort of contact such that there were cave paintings all over the world pointing to their origin, so that when humans amassed enough knowledge and were ready to meet their maker, they knew where to go. And I mean, it'd be cool, because then you're like, oh, I'm going to meet my maker or God or whatever. But do you? Because if we now know that we live in this infinite universe and it's just like some alien Chad that showed up on Earth one day on a Tuesday, that would be really disappointing. And then we would be seeking yet again, which is part of why in the beginning of this episode, I talk about the law of diminishing returns. It seems like the quest for knowledge is unsatiable. And that the more you know, the more you just develop more questions about things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It would seem like the never-ending hallway, right? The faster and faster you run, the longer the hall stretches out in front of you.
Mm-hmm.
Which I think is just the nature of information and knowledge. It's like knowledge, and then what is the opposite of knowledge? Absence of information.
Ignorance.
I guess you could call it ignorance, but ignorance is kind of a different thing because you can be willfully ignorant about something.
True.
But yeah, I mean, like, so you have this sort of dichotomy of like, yes, no, 0, 1, 1 being knowledge, 0 being lack of knowledge. It would seem that it's sort of like a baked into the cake sort of process of reality, or the continuation. But I mean, like, I've talked about this before too, is like my first principle of reality is expansion. So I think that I think expansion is just a process, and just like we can have an expansion of a universe and a star, and the expansion of the tides and the expansion of the lungs or the air in your lungs.
Mm-hmm.
You can also have an expansion of knowledge, and that that's why we call this show Exofathom. We're constantly pushing that knowledge out into, if you think about knowledge as a universe, what is it expanding into? What is knowledge expanding into?
Oh, okay. Now you're getting me on this whole consciousness detractor, because I'm of the belief that consciousness does survive after death somehow in some weird quantum spiritual fusion that we have yet to untangle. Mostly because they proved that thoughts are actually light in our brains. Like there's a light mechanism in our brain. Anyway, so yeah, I mean, you're right. Like all these ideas, all this knowledge, it's being absorbed by minds, not just brains, but minds and consciousness. Maybe we would find more about spontaneous knowledge and we realize that
what do you
there
think
really
knowledge
isn't.
expands into? I mean, is it not the same thing the universe is expanding into?
I think that chaos theory makes it hard to pin that down because knowledge can expand into all kinds of good things, all kind of bad things, all kind of dead ends.
Right, but it's still expanding into something, right? You know, so it's like the universe is expanding into something. We don't know what that something is. It's not defined. It's at the envelope or the parameters of the universe. We got Del Jesus is back. He's died and resurrected.
Did you say Del Jesus?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
That's all right.
Can you hear me? Is everything good?
Yeah, you
Yes,
sound great.
perfect.
Yeah, my this is a work computer. My main computer got beer spilled all over it like a year ago, so I cleaned it.
Oh no. Yeah.
But now it's having some issues. I think it's time for another cleaning. But
Hmm.
yeah. So I'm back with a really this fucking
Reincarnated.
It's so awkward.
No,
It's
this
way
is
too tight.
Yep.
well, no, it's
It's
so
a
glad that
virgin frame, which is a horrible joke, but I'm gonna make it.
well, I'm really glad that you came back because Nick is asking a very provocative question. And that is to say that if knowledge is ever expansive, such as our universe and all the things in it to be discovered, what is it expanding into?
The void.
The void.
And there you have it, folks.
Mhm.
The void strikes again.
Well, no, knowledge expands infinitely, right? In much different directions. I don't know if we will ever be able to coalesce all of knowledge to like one single wisdom principle or something, right? Like this is the one principle where everything else is born from.
Thought it did.
But I think that would be simple for us. But I see it as a fractal that expands in all directions. And what do you do when you get to infinity? You keep going. So it's just like a void of expansion, or like it's an expansion in the void. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's.
What do
it's
you
better
consider
just-
the void? Ignorance or
Um,
unknown?
yeah, unknown is
Potentiality.
makes the best sense.
it's the dimension
Unperceived.
of it's the dimension of lack of dimension, I guess. It's like that. Yeah, expanded. Like nothingness, but infinity at the same time. In this case, it's hard to describe. I'm sorry.
No.
The void wasn't.
I think it's supposed to be hard to describe. Yeah.
Absolutely. I
so
didn't do
it's-
much better. I went on
it's
this
where-
like chaos theory rant.
It's where like everything and nothing come together in a singularity into a single point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's I feel like is the void.
I think that's fair. I think that's as close as you can get, like you said, entropy or chaos. Maybe potentiality, but yeah, it's very under just like the question of what the hell is the universe expanding into. I don't know, man.
Now you know why I'm doing so many space episodes, man.
But it has a very like practical purpose in the sense of job security, because the more knowledge you have, the more specialized you get. Specializations require jobs, so it's like beneficiary, I guess.
Yeah, so science knowledge can sort of translate into functionality.
In this dimension.
Yeah,
Hopefully.
Well, cool. Now, okay, so I'm going to ask a question, which is that we've had the word magic in our vocabulary.
Jesus, ugly. I'm sorry. Keep going. I'm just telling you my face. Keep going.
Every human on earth is beautiful, Mike, and just the way they are. Believe
fuck
it,
off.
know it. There's a reason I don't use video. I find it too distracting. I'm too vain, and I don't want to
my
be looking at
narcissism started to
myself.
creep in. I'm like, on my computer, I'm blurry enough, but on this, I can see myself.
Too crisp.
Too crisp. Do one of those Snapchat overlays.
Yeah, you need like a
airbrush your face.
Yes, yeah. Get some Vaseline and just put it over the camera. Give you that sort of glowy look.
Hey,
Oh, mesh
it
cloth.
is a work computer, so I can do this.
Hey, there,
There you
nice,
go.
nice.
There's the
Absolutely.
void we were talking about.
All right, Ayla.
Yeah. Let's
You
wrap
had a
this up.
question, sorry.
So yeah, okay. So here's my question: is magic, that word? I should have looked up the etymology of that word and how far back it goes, but there seems to be like alchemy, for example. Modern feats of chemistry, if you went back in time, would be defined as magic. And I guess my question is that when it comes to knowledge and science and then magic, right, where we have this idea that one is based in reality and one sort of woo woo, but at the same time one can appear to be the other depending on the point in time and the information that the observers have at that time. What do you think about that in terms of just the
That's the
evolution of
question.
magic?
The questions are always like this soliloquy of things, and then you're like, so what do you think about that? And I'm like, well, I mean, you said like 5 different things. I don't know.
I think I'm just throwing out some
get it.
stuff. See what
Yeah,
you'll-
well, so alchemy was always a big thing back in ancient cultures, especially sort of ancient mystery schools.
Mhm.
I think the understanding now is that they weren't literally trying to, I mean, some were literally trying to turn lead into gold, but it's a concept of transmutation and the transmuting of energy, first and foremost. So alchemy is an inward science. It's not really about metal. It's about transmuting energies inside yourself and then transforming that lead into gold within you.
Mm.
Yeah.
So that's like, oh, Mike, did you want to add anything?
Well, that's the hidden knowledge, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, if we were in a circle and we were all talking as something about this alchemy thing, and you're like, oh, you can really turn lead into gold, but somebody else might look at me and just give a certain sign that they knew that we're really talking about emotion, right? In a modern day example, I could say something like, it was really interesting the other day. I had this where I used to live somewhere else, and there was a fire, and the fire burned everything away. But in that fire, like I thought everything was lost, but I found this little tiny, like Hulk statue in the fire. And to you, that sounds like I just found a little like statue. But if we had some like initiated people, a fire could mean something. A Hulk statue could be a symbol for anger, and alchemy worked in the same way.
Mm.
So it's very likely that this stuff exists today. And because we have so many people, I wouldn't be too shocked if it's broadcasted on television or YouTube or something like that, something with like a wider audience to cast out coded messages of knowledge and wisdom that we're gaining today. And it just uses the same vehicle as alchemy did so long ago.
Yeah.
Mm.
And that process of turning lead into gold would be, instead of feeling traumatized and awful about the entirety of my life being burnt to the ground, I'm going to take this Hulk and remind me of the things that I do have.
Yes.
And use
exactly.
it as a cherished totem of the things that I do have. That would be the alchemical response to that.
Exactly.
Right.
Or you go into the process of, no, you're right. Like, or you go to no, it's fine. I was like trying to create something like create the whole thing, but that doesn't work in the story. So you're
I mean, yeah, you could
I'm just
definitely if you meditated on it further. I'm sure you could.
yeah, I'm just being an idiot in the moment. But yeah, no, that's 100% correct. That's how this sort of like secret wisdom gets passed out.
Awesome. Well, I just have 2 more things and then we'll wrap it up here. I'm so sorry we're going way over, but this is just so
That's all right.
interesting. And I'm so happy that this topic has such juicy conversation. So the first thing, and this is from a Wiccan blog, because I was like, well, if, we're talking magic, let's go to the source. And it's
If
a
the
Wiccan
blog's
blog
not,
about
if
Thoth.
it's not named Wikipedia, then I don't want to hear from it.
It's so funny as a like Wikipedia, like nobody tells you to source it, right?
Right.
Here's the funny thing: if you get far enough in academics, where you're beyond like I'm waiting like peer review paper. So there's a teacher that's waiting for a paper to be peer reviewed. They put that stuff on Wikipedia, and then you go to Wikipedia, and that's your one source of truth. Like
It's called idea laundering. Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice. Nice. Well, I thought you were going to go into like, oh, sorry.
No, keep going. You're good.
Oh, I thought you were going to get into academia and like the footnotes, because the footnotes is where the party's at, people. I don't know if you've been reading any textbooks lately, but I loved myself some footnotes. It's just like you find the best information there, and you can really deep dive and find influence. And I'm getting off the topic.
Yeah, I love the professors that say fuck the footnotes. I'm just going to copy and paste my whole book onto Wikipedia. And then show it to you and point it.
There you go.
Yeah, if you want to go to it, you can. If not, you got to go spend like $300 at the student store. But it's there.
But it's there. Well, so what's cool about this Wiccan blog is she talks about how from the earliest times the act of writing had been seen as magical or occult practice, just in its nature. And you think about it, like to a long time ago, like right now most people know how to read and write, but there was a time when it was actually just a very small group of people that were initiated into that. And perhaps because not many people could read or write, those who could were seen as powerful. And she talks about how in certain writings, especially Hermetic writings, they start with the divine quote word. And the ancient traditions held that sounding out words or vowels had some sort of magical impact, or that writing words strengthened intention behind them, imbuing them with magical energy. And so you think about people who maybe they're manifesting, they're writing a thought like 10 times. Like I've seen TikToks about manifesting and how often it has writing involved. And so she's talking about magic being an important part of personal religion during Roman Empire, and spells sold in Roman Egypt are found quite frequently by archaeologists. And a complex grassroots belief system sprung up alongside the organized theology of the temple system. So I guess to that, I was thinking about, do you think words are spells?
Well, I mean, this is all taken from Jewish mysticism, Kabbalah, right? So like this idea that every intonation of a word, every letter has its own intonation, its own frequency and pitch. That's in Hebrew. And it's also associated with a number. So they have their own numerology associated with their alphabet, associated with music, associated with tonality. So they have like all of this intermixed together. And yeah, I mean, the word has always been the thing that's created the universe. In the Christian tradition, I believe, obviously in the Jewish tradition, you also have sound being a major influence in Tolkien and a lot of different creation myths. Sound is the creation of the universe. But
and then writing that sound is an incredible feat, to be able to say, I'm going to write this sound on a piece of paper, give it to a human that hasn't heard it, but they can see what I wrote and they know how to say it too.
Right. And then you have abracadabra, right?
Yeah, words are magic sort of thing, like I make it so or something like that.
Yes.
Yeah, keep going. I had an idea, but I lost it. Obviously, it wasn't important.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you had abracadabra, which was used in amulets and talismans. And it's from Aramaic. It says, I create the word, or I create like the word. Sorry. So that's what that means. Abracadabra.
I always thought it was like make it so or something like that.
Yeah, I think it's
something
loose
similar.
translations. Yeah.
Okay.
But the idea too is that you're speaking into reality the thing that you want to have happen. And I've always had issues with this concept personally, because I feel like and maybe it's a logic that's best applied present forward, rather than, oh, something horrible happened and then you look backward at how you might have accidentally manifested it such that you're punished. Because I don't think that's accurate. I think it has to be something that's just present forward. Otherwise you'll lose your mind. Speaking from experience.
Yeah,
Trying to think like, what did you do?
Now you're touching at the core of the subject of knowledge. So, like for example, look at the lighthouse, right? The symbol of the eyes like burning the face. There's a very iconic scene in that movie where the Green Goblin looks at Edward from
Twilight.
yes, thank you, and he like stares wisdom into him. The thing is
Ooh.
that you're never really ready for knowledge or wisdom. It's a burning, blinding light. So I feel like that's the side effect of knowledge that you're talking about.
Yeah, it can be really consuming. And it's also one of those things, too, that without a sort of maybe mentor or guide or sage, it's easy to go down an unhelpful rabbit hole.
But how do you make a sage?
Right.
Is a sage mentor a sage? Like in most shamanic traditions, it's up to the shaman to travel out there alone.
Mhm.
And they either die or come back.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
Right. Exactly. Sink or swim.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, again, like I said, I haven't really come to any conclusions on all of that, but I do think that there's something interesting to time distinguish your perception and to be really clear if you are taking a principle and applying it present forward or retroactively. And that keeping those intentionally separate is very important. It's a little logical issue too, I think.
Yeah, Prometheus and Epimetheus. We
Right.
talked about it in the
Forethought and afterthought.
Hey, I feel like Epimetheus is like the most underrated here, like God that you could like a Titan that you can have. Like, imagine if you didn't have afterthought. Imagine if you just did shit.
You
never.
I mean,
Afterthought
you wouldn't
is
have
that
the
guy at the bar.
information to ruminate. That's for sure. Yeah.
True.
I don't think you could ever get to wisdom if you don't have Epimetheus.
Right. And maybe through that's a perfect example of wisdom through foolishness,
Yeah.
wisdom through error
and reflection.
And reflection. Yeah.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, the last little bit I wanted to share is that Thoth's knowledge of magic, they're using magic with a K, and language actually allowed him to help Isis during one mythological story. When Osiris was dismembered, Isis brought the pieces of his body back together. Anubis mummified the body, and Thoth gave her the words to resurrect Osiris so that she could be impregnated. And he also gave Iris the words to resurrect Horus after he was slain. So speaking of knowledge, laws of diminishing return, wisdom versus knowledge, and I guess maybe spiritual traditions and things like that. In recent news, I heard that scientists were able to reanimate dead pig cells. And in the article, scientists warn that the findings aren't yet clinically relevant, but they say the research raises ethical questions about the definition of death. And so here we are, this really interesting point, right? Where we have knowledge scratching at, I don't even know. I mean, I don't know the words to sort of tie this all together. My brain's a little foggy, but
death is the
ultimate mystery.
Calm down. Yes, it is. sorry. I'm fighting between two ideas of mine. So in death tends to be the obsession of cultures that are beyond or advanced in their time. So like the Egyptians were obsessed with death, right? That's because they've pretty much did all the other stuff. And philosophically, basically, it's the one place where you can't get certain answers, right? Like nobody knows what happens after you die. So all the efforts of research point towards death and then afterwards in a sufficiently advanced culture. Once we've conquered death, then I'm sure it will change.
Yeah. I don't know what to say about the pig thing, to be honest, other than I would just ask the same questions that we probably asked a million times before, is that, if you're resurrected, are you still? And I think that's, you know, that's the element of mystery, right? That's that mysticism, the demystic. I don't know if that ever is 100% removed, because it seems like there's always a new question.
Yeah, I'm sure you. I feel like we're just biological programs. Like if I died and then like somehow you found some way to like get some clampers from AutoZone and put them on my heart and like just jumpstart it and it worked, I would still be the same person. I don't think it changes it.
Well, and I think it's interesting
Oh,
because
I don't know. I mean, near-death experiences have changed people's lives, and that was just near death. Yeah,
not
right.
actual death. Actual death is different than near death.
How do you know?
Well,
Have
near
you been
death.
I know.
Near
I
death,
know.
Near death allows you to keep the imagination of death, right? It allows you to mystify death still. But actual death, if you've actually died, then that's a different case.
I would ask if that's still the same person, just like a teleporter. Is it still the same person? I don't know.
Nice.
You're getting into like the philosophy of personal identity, which is really interesting because there does seem to be, from an intuitive standpoint, a couple of benchmarks that we require in order to say that a person is still a person. There's the ship of Theseus
And
situation.
I think continuity is a big one.
Continuity is a big one, actually.
Yeah.
Continuity of memory. Because, you know, like if you fall asleep, go into a coma for 10 years, wake up, and you still have the same memories you did prior to the coma, you are considered still to be yourself. But if you wake up and have no memories, you're still the same person in body, but it could be argued that from that point on, you are developing a new version of yourself that's starting there. There's like a break. Some people argue that that's kind of like a trickier philosophical rabbit hole to get down into.
Yeah.
But then I do think that a lot of folks rest on this sort of continuity of the self, which I was thinking about this because this article says researchers at Yale University used a new technology to restore cells in some organs of pigs that had just died, bringing the animal cells back to function. The findings, which were published in the scientific journal Nature, raise profound ethical questions about how medicine defines death, but also teases new possibilities for the collection of human organs for transplant. And I think, you know, when you think about that, that's now. In 20 or 30 years, you know, how is that knowledge going to progress? And how are we going to I mean, you know, like I guess it's one of those things where it's impossible to know what's going to be standard operating information 30 years from now. We can only really know what we know in the present. And yet imagining what could be seems to be the thing that gets us to 30 years in the future. So again, it all comes down to this idea of thought, which is filtered through words, and words being something that's associated with this deity. I don't know. It can be flawed, but can also be the vehicle with which to impart knowledge, you know,
Yeah,
which can then
it's
be
the embodiment of knowledge, the spirit of knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
that's why it's a god. It's not a physical thing. It's an abstract, like, you know. So yeah, it's an embodiment of the idea of knowledge. That's what Thoth is.
What are you looking for in Thoth? What
me?
matters to anybody, or listeners? Who cares? What do you think somebody looks for in the idea of Thoth? And the idea of wisdom and knowledge and words and all that stuff. Are we trying to advance to the point where we always pick the perfect words, or are we trying to advance to the point where we have the perfect knowledge on things? Like what's the?
Oh yeah. So
what are we doing here?
I think, you know, when we did the Prometheus episode, I really got to thinking about this concept of knowledge and the light bringer, and the way that that character has been good and bad, or divided among other characters and split. And even in the religion or the mythology of Thoth, you have all these concepts sort of sprinkled through deities with these interrelationships. And for me, I think it's just kind of interesting to take pause and reflect upon what it is that we think of when we think of knowledge and wisdom. What is the point? What is it all for? How does it develop over generations of humans?
Do you think that one of the goals of knowledge is to overcome death?
I think that humans have several different questions that really bother us. And I think death is definitely one of them. And I think that, death is addressed. I mean, when something bad happens, right, you usually will confide in your religious background, or you'll confide in poems and art, things that kind of transcend or offer transcendence from a moment. And I don't know, I lost my thought. I have allergies and my eyes are really scratchy right
You're
now.
fine. You're fine. So, transcendence from a moment. Thoth offers wisdom. So, is wisdom? Do we seek wisdom to transcend certain moments to gain a broad understanding of the moment that, in the human sense, that we can't understand?
I guess I'm thinking of it more in like a Da Vinci Code kind of way. Remember you have like the second Da Vinci Code where they have the CERN atom. Oh, sorry, my eyes are just really scratchy. Just the idea that science and
No
religion have been
worries.
so against each other, and it's just funny because it's like two sides of like the knowledge coin. I need to
I
wash my
gotcha.
eyes. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no worries. So there's a certain component of wisdom that comes to like faith. Like like the knowledge can build everything out and it can be useful to push faith for or push wisdom forward. But you still like need a little bit of component of faith so that the wisdom works. I can't hear you, Dick. I don't know if your mic is muted.
It's muted. Sorry.
Yeah,
Yeah, it would seem a little bit paradoxical, I guess, right? Because like you have this concept of wisdom and then faith. You would assume that the wise man doesn't suffer any time for faith, but I think that you're probably right that there is an element of unknown that you just have to sort of be okay with. And I think that maybe wisdom does come with a little bit of acceptance of the lack of knowledge that you have, not just the knowledge that you have, the knowing that you don't know.
Yeah, there's a lot of security in that. Once you've realized that, like, it's okay to say I don't know. It's okay to say, yeah, like I've known it for all of this time, or like, where am I? Okay, there we go. I've known it for all of this time,
Yes.
but now once I've moved it over to here, I don't know what will happen. It's okay. Mathematically speaking, this is something like a proof of induction, where you've proven up to 1 or 0. We could get into a very long argument about that. Doesn't matter until n. I've proven these steps that from 1 to n steps, this is always what happens. And then now in the n plus 1 step, I know this is what will happen. Reality, though, what you're using the knowledge of the past and then a little bit of faith to that n plus 1.
Right. Yeah. I guess it's the concept of certainty. There's always that little wiggle room that you have to factor in for if you want to use your knowledge wisely, right? You could be arrogant about your knowledge and think that you know every variable.
Hey, listen, I've known every variable from the ton of time. I've never made a mistake.
Right. Yes.
I've never.
Very good. Good track record.
Yeah, 10 out of 10 track record.
Absolutely.
10 out
Yeah,
of
no, you're right.
10.
You could be very arrogant in your knowledge, but what's funny is that the wisdom you build is like a counterfeit diamond. It's cheap. It doesn't. It's not worth much. It might be worth something in some situations, but You can usually suss it out pretty quick, and it's like that true wisdom that's hard to come by, but is still fallible. And that's what I find
Yeah.
interesting, is that wisdom is always fallible.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I also like think about Thoth and wisdom. Like if I was a god of knowledge, I was like Thoth, and I gave a species knowledge. When I came back, would I really want them to know I was there?
Yeah.
Like when I want to reflect on my teaching abilities and
Yeah.
see if they did good things with the knowledge I gave them, and just not exist.
Yeah, the best experiment would be to, let the machine go, run free,
Yeah.
and not try to tinker with it any further. And maybe that's where also a demonstration of wisdom, right? Knowing when to let something go and observe it from a distance,
Yeah.
Or
Not
when to
im-
end an episode on wisdom.
Right. or not to involve yourself, because your participation in a thing could bring its detriment.
What's
knowing
yeah,
that as
it's,
well.
yeah, it's so interesting how like even one word can impact a situation and move it into a completely different situation. And when it comes to like things of like production, of industry, of I don't know, the mechanics of moving a society forward, that one word can break whole civilizations if you're not careful. So I kind of like the idea that like this god of wisdom, this Thoth thing, is a silent figure that just sort of watches and then tweaks things in the background and then moves. Because I think at the end of the day, that is what wisdom is. Like you move things in the shadow so that the people that are learning the shadows will find something that is closer to correct of how reality should operate.
The disimpassioned observer.
Yeah.
I like it.
Yeah, kind of like teach a fish. What is it? Teach a man a fish versus giving him a fish. You're sort of just letting them figure it out.
Teach a man a fish or slap a man with a fish. Got Jesus slapping people with fish all over the place.
Oh, look at that. Oh, wow. Nice, Nick. That's a
Hey, if he slaps me with that fish, as long as he knows how to cook it, I'm fine.
That's right.
The
Absolutely.
fact that the word
Agreed.
fish and the way to say it is quite important too. So, but yeah, I thought this was such an interesting deity, and thanks so much for taking this little walk down the knowledge questioning path with me. And if you want to add anything, feel free. But that is all I have for tonight. And thanks so much to those listening and to you guys.
I have a question for you.
Okay.
Suppose Thoth taught a bunch of civilizations knowledge and wisdom, like a sort of eunuch. Makes Thoth an eunuch. Can I do the same thing? And left and came back, but wanted to experience things as a human, and requested a memory dump. Do you think Thoth could pick up on the just to like be in the moment of the knowledge, like to make an experiment of himself? I'm trying. My mind's splitting.
You mean like could Thoth kind of live as a mortal human?
I'm more not.
Like
Yes, but I'm more curious about the report back to himself. So, like, if Thoth became a human, but requested that he forgot everything that he taught humans, so that he could experience life as a human in that time to gain the understanding or misunderstandings that he tried to teach the humans. At this current point in time, where we're at now, do you think the report back to the god Thoth, not the human Thoth, would be good or bad? Do you think like
I think he would laugh. I think he would laugh at the irony that we're swimming in a sea of knowledge but have no wisdom. I really do. I mean, I think that he would see this, and we have every piece of information we could ever want at our fingertips at all times, at any given point. And we don't seem to have nurtured wisdom in our cultures. At least, modern cultures and cultures that I'm familiar with. I know that there are exceptions out there, but yeah, I think you would probably find there's a lot of irony going on.
Do you think that Thoth would cry because he was unable to teach humans wisdom?
He would cry oceans and oceans of information, and it will drown even deeper into the sea of of chaos. Yeah, no, I think.
Oh, how poetic are you?
I think he would be. I think he would be pretty upset. I think he would be a little bit like. I think there would be lamentation for sure. Yeah,
yeah, it would be
because
like laughing instead of crying, sort of thing. Like,
yeah,
like it's so funny, but he's like, fuck, I fucked up. Like, this is something they should understand, but I don't understand why they don't understand.
Right.
I think that's sort of the crux of the alleged Thoth prophecy. I just say alleged because I don't really, I didn't dive too much into it, and it's probably like,
Why are you walking on eggshells about a
I don't know why I'm walking.
6,000 years old. Honestly, he's not going to come to get you, Ayla. It's okay.
I just mean like I don't really know how to contextualize it, where it came from, or if it's like it means something different from the one video that I like skimmed about it. But what they were just saying is that like, yes, humanity has sort of this like integrated existence with knowledge, and then as time goes on they lose that sort of integration and go all off on the wrong thing. I mean, like, think about it. Like if the point of living was just to be kind to one another, and you think about all the barriers that prevent that for people, then we've missed the point entirely. And so in the prophecy, quote unquote, there's a point where we circle back, where things get so bad that we end up looking to the heavens again, and that just kind of repeats itself.
Well, we're constantly obsessed with our fall from grace, and that's what it really comes down to. And all of our mythology has talked about a moment that we try to reorient ourselves to God, we get struck down by the confoundingness of omniscience and omnipotence and knowledge and all of this stuff. It's like, so yeah, I think that we're constantly sort of just like, psychologically, we have a psychological chip on our shoulder about this idea that we fell from some sort of period of grace in which we were, at one with everything before the curse of knowing, the fruit of knowledge, right?
So, do you think after that, there are moments where wisdom and knowledge was attempted to be instilled by Thoth or an avatar of Thoth? Leading my further question is, do you think something like Jesus Christ is actually Thoth trying to come back and bring humanity back from the chaos and do something closer to wisdom?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of huge archetypal similarities for sure. This sort of idea of redemption through knowledge and information as well. And a little bit more close, orienting humanity towards divinity. Now, I don't know, like Jesus, like you have this sort of Old Testament accounting of the Luciferian idea of knowledge. And then I don't know if it's exactly analogous with Jesus, but I could definitely see where it's like this sort of redemption factor that knowledge could be redeeming to humankind. Information could redeem mankind. And I think that we are constantly seeking for redemption.
Yes, but the human who holds the double-edged sword can flip it one way or another, right?
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
So you have Jesus, you have Lucifer. The two might be concretely Thoth, but as the representation to humanity, I often wonder if something like a Christ-like figure was just one aspect of Thoth.
I could see that. Yeah.
Well, and I was thinking back to the Prometheus myth and how, as that one character, he exemplifies both sacrifice and bringing of knowledge. And then that character gets split into two, the Jesus character that sacrifices and the Luciferian character that gives ill-gotten knowledge or spooky knowledge that has like a double edge. And it's interesting because with sacrifice, that's an action, but with knowledge, it's a thought. And so I wonder if on some level we recognize that there's this duality between thought and action that somehow interplays with the presence of wisdom.
I wouldn't be surprised. So thought comes before action, right? Best example is that if you psychologically profile serial killers, you start to find that there's this level of fantasy that comes before the actual action, right? That's the thought that comes before the action. And I've lost the plot. I forgot my idea. I'm sorry. I was drinking.
I think we're burnt out, man.
We've been thinking too much.
2 hours and 20 minutes. We don't go
Those
this long.
wisdom, actions, knowledge.
We'll never know. That's the point.
My intelligence metabolism has slowed way down, so I'm starting to feel a little bloated here.
No, it's I apologize to me. I didn't sleep like Monday or Tuesday, and then I got like 12 hours of sleep after that. So I think I've probably had 12 hours of sleep this whole week.
You both
This is like your
overslept
8
and
a.m.
underslept at the same time.
Yeah, somehow.
Yeah.
I don't do these ideas too well anymore. I'm so sorry.
Brain no work good.
Brain
Yeah.
and no do.
I'm just gonna start grunting soon.
Right. But I think what Mike was just talking about was just, like we separate thought and action in our legal system. There's like premeditated action versus like happenstance stuff and whatever.
It's not
Like
illegal to think about killing somebody, right? Like,
well, that's what Minority Report gets into, and you think about forethought, afterthought, but brain no work good.
Yeah. All right, let's wrap this up. Yeah.
Let's do. Thanks again for just taking this deep dive. Appreciate it.
Yeah, and thanks to Ayla for bringing this conversation to our table. We really appreciate it. Way to go, Ayla. Nice.
Thank you.
And we hope that you enjoyed this episode. Thanks so much to our viewers out there. Thanks, Big Mike. We love you. And we'd love to have you on the podcast. Huh?
Big Mike.
Next week's teaser.
Ayla, you just threw off my flow.
Oh.
You messed up my groove. All right, I'm ending the stream. Sorry, guys. No. Yeah. No. I was trying to say thank you to the people that watched. If you wouldn't mind just letting me do that. Thank you so much. Appreciate you guys. We appreciate you. Thank you, Big Mike. Thanks for commenting along with us. We really appreciate you, bro. And yes, thank you, Ayla, for reminding me we have a teaser for our 100th episode next week, next Friday at 8 p.m. I'm thinking I'm a little bit torn between two ideas, but I think this conversation pushed me over the edge. We're going to talk about the myth of Narcissus. I think that'll be an interesting topic of conversation for next week. So stay tuned, 8 p.m. next Friday for our 100th episode of Exofathom. Again, thank you guys. We really appreciate all of you. Give us a thumbs up and a subscription to our YouTube page. It would really help us out. Also, check out our network of podcasts we have at Thinkering Talks on Facebook. Tuesday nights, we have Keelan with If Numbers Could Talk, 8:30 p.m. Wednesdays is Screen Time Continuum with me and Mike and Keelan. Every Wednesday and Sunday at 8:30 p.m. as well. You got Tuesdays and Thursdays with Dijon the Mustard over on Twitch. You can catch him at Strawberries and Coffee on Twitch and on YouTube. Strawberries and Coffee, Tuesdays, Thursday nights, 10 p.m. Go check him out. Let's see what else. Friday nights, Exofathom, you know that. Saturday mornings is with Keelan and Bobby for This Married Moments between 10 a.m. and noon. Very good podcast. A lot of fun listening to those two chat it up about marital life and just, little conversations that You wouldn't expect to be so interesting, but they do it very well over there. So check them out. This Married Moment, Saturday mornings between 10 a.m. and noon on Spotify, on YouTube, and on Facebook. And I think that's it. Sunday nights always for Screen Time Continuum as well. But until next time, Cognauts, thank you so much. I'm going to start grunting if I keep talking. So.
Great job.
Yeah, we appreciate all you out there. And until next time, stay out there, and we will catch you on the next Exofathom. Good night.
Peace.
Take it easy.
You should have said take it sleazy.
I thought it.